If you have been scrolling through South China Sea news lately, you have probably seen satellite images of a place called Antelope Reef suddenly popping up everywhere. In Chinese, it is called Lingyang Jiao. A year ago, most people outside policy circles had never heard of it. It was just another coral reef in the Paracel Islands. Now, it is becoming one of the most talked about pieces of real estate in Asia. So what is really going on? Let's zoom out first. The South China Sea is not just a patch of blue on the map. It is one of the busiest waterways on the planet. Roughly $5 trillion in trade passes through it every year. Tankers, container ships, bulk carriers, LNG vessels, you name it. If you draw a line from the Middle East to East Asia, from Europe to Japan, from Africa to South Korea, chances are it crosses these waters. And in the northern part of this sea sits the Paracel Islands, known in China as the Xisha Islands. China controls them. Vietnam also claims them. The Philippines claims parts of the broader region further south. The U.S. sails through regularly under what it calls freedom of navigation operations. So this is not some sleepy tropical zone. It is a geopolitical crossroads. Now enter Antelope Reef. According to satellite imagery that began circulating in late 2025 and early 2026, land reclamation at Antelope Reef accelerated dramatically. What used to be a coral outcrop barely breaking the surface is now reported to be more than 15 square kilometers of newly created land. Dredgers have been working around the clock. Harbors, piers, and channels are being carved out at the same time as the land is being filled. 22 dredging vessels operating day and night is not a small operation. That scale tells you something important. That is not a temporary construction project. It is long-term. To understand why this matters, we have to rewind to 2013. That was when China began its large-scale land reclamation campaign in the Spratly Islands in the southern part of the South China Sea. Reefs like Fiery Cross Reef, Subi Reef, and Mischief Reef were transformed into artificial islands. Fiery Cross Reef now covers roughly 2.8 square kilometers of reclaimed land. Subi Reef covers about 3.9 square kilometers. Mischief Reef is about 5.5 square kilometers. These outposts now have airstrips, hangars, radar systems, ports, and living facilities. Back then, the world reacted strongly. The United States accused China of militarizing the South China Sea. Regional claimants protested. In 2016, an arbitral tribunal in The Hague ruled against China's 9-line claim in a case brought by the Philippines. China rejected the ruling. But construction did not stop. It evolved. After consolidating its positions in the Spratlys, attention gradually shifted northward to the Paracels. Unlike the Spratlys, which are scattered and contested among multiple countries, the Paracels have been under Chinese control since 1974, after a naval clash with South Vietnam. China administers them as part of Hainan Province. Yongxing Island, also known internationally as Woody Island, is the administrative center. It already has a runway, government buildings, and civilian residents. Antelope Reef sits in this Paracel cluster, in a geographically sensitive spot. It is roughly 350 kilometers from Da Nang, Vietnam's major central port city. That distance is close enough to matter strategically, but far enough to avoid immediate coastal entanglement. If you look at a map, Antelope Reef is not just any dot. It lies in a position that can help connect and reinforce the surveillance and logistics network stretching from the Spratlys in the south to the Paracels in the north. Think of it as a missing node in a chain. So when analysts talk about Antelope Reef, they are not just talking about sand and concrete. They are talking about coverage, logistics, deterrence, and presence. Critics say this is militarization. Supporters say this is a consolidation of sovereignty. The truth depends on where you sit. From Beijing's perspective, land reclamation is about turning paper claims into physical control. In maritime disputes, presence matters. Patrol boats alone cannot permanently secure scattered reefs. Permanent facilities can. Airstrips extend reach. Ports allow ships to dock without having to sail back to Hainan. Radar stations improve situational awareness. Communications nodes tie everything together. There is also the anti-access and area denial concept that Western analysts often raise. China has invested heavily in systems designed to complicate or deter foreign military operations near its coast: radar, missiles, electronic warfare systems, submarines, surface ships, aircraft, all networked. An island outpost enhances that network. But here is where it gets more complicated. Artificial islands are not just about missiles and runways. They can also serve civilian purposes. China has repeatedly said its facilities in the South China Sea provide public goods, including search and rescue, weather forecasting, disaster relief, and fisheries support. If you are a fisherman operating far from the mainland, a well-equipped outpost with fuel, fresh water, medical facilities, and a safe harbor during a typhoon is not trivial. The South China Sea is prone to powerful storms. Early warning systems and meteorological stations can save lives. Energy and resources also factor in. The South China Sea is believed to hold significant oil and gas reserves, though estimates vary widely. It is also rich in fisheries. There has been talk for years about methane hydrates, sometimes called combustible ice, on the seabed. Control of nearby reefs strengthens claims over surrounding exclusive economic zones, at least from China's legal viewpoint. Now let's talk about international law. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which China has ratified, artificial islands do not generate territorial seas of their own. A naturally formed island that can sustain human habitation can generate a 12 nautical mile territorial sea and a 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. A rock that cannot sustain human habitation gets only a 12 nautical mile territorial sea. An artificial island gets neither. It has a safety zone around it, but it does not create new maritime rights. That is where disputes get heated. China argues that many of the features it occupies are islands, or have historical significance under its 9-line claim. The 2016 tribunal ruling said that many of the features in the Spratlys are legally rocks or low-tide elevations. China rejects that ruling as illegitimate. Antelope Reef, being in the Paracels, sits in a slightly different context. China has effective control there. Vietnam contests sovereignty. Other countries watch closely but are not direct claimants to the Paracels. From a strategic perspective, building a 15-square-kilometer island is a serious statement. That is large enough to host a small town. You can fit a 3,000-meter runway, multiple hangars, warehouses, living quarters, fuel storage, desalination plants, and power generation facilities, and still have space left over. Western media often frames these islands as forward military bases. Chinese media often refer to them as comprehensive support platforms. In reality, they can be both. Let's talk about deterrence. Deterrence is not about firing the first shot. It is about convincing others not to take actions you consider threatening. A radar turning on can alter ship routes without a missile ever being launched. A visible runway changes calculations for any military planner in the region. Vietnam and the Philippines have also built up features they occupy in the South China Sea, though at a smaller scale. Vietnam has extended airstrips and built facilities on some Spratly features. The Philippines has upgraded infrastructure on Thitu Island, locally known as Pag-asa. The narrative that only one side is changing the facts on the ground is incomplete. The difference is scale. China's capacity to dredge and build is unmatched in the region. When it moves big. Antelope Reef is the most realistic trump card in the South China Sea situation. It demonstrates that physical presence reshapes the strategic environment in ways that diplomacy alone cannot. Once land is there, it is hard to reverse. No country is realistically going to dismantle a fully developed artificial island backed by a major power. That is why some analysts say the real test comes after construction. Building is one thing. Governing is another. How do you balance military and civilian functions? How do you manage environmental impact? Coral reefs are fragile ecosystems. Dredging destroys them. Sediment plumes affect marine life. Long-term sustainability requires careful management, or the area could become ecologically degraded. Yongxing Island offers a model. It started primarily as a military outpost. Over time, it gained civilian administration, schools, a hospital, and even limited-scale tourism. Infrastructure was built in stages, basic transport first, then energy systems, then more specialized facilities. If Antelope Reef is indeed larger, its potential is even greater. 15 square kilometers is not tiny. That is bigger than many small island nations' urban centers. In theory, you could develop a permanent community there. Now let's address the big question: does this threaten freedom of navigation? Commercial shipping through the South China Sea has continued largely uninterrupted. Despite heated rhetoric, there has been no systematic blockade of international trade routes. Container ships still pass through the Malacca Strait and into the South China Sea, heading toward China, Japan, and Korea. The U.S. Navy conducts freedom of navigation operations to challenge what it considers excessive maritime claims. These operations often sail within 12 nautical miles of Chinese-occupied features. China protests, tracks, and shadows them. But again, no shots fired. So the impact so far has been more about signaling than actual disruption. However, in a crisis scenario, these islands could play a more active role. They could support air patrols, extend radar coverage, and serve as logistics hubs. That is why other countries watch them closely. China is not seeking war but using deterrence as a peace tool. That idea is common in strategic thinking. The logic goes like this: if your defenses are strong and visible, others will think twice before provoking you. Peace through strength. Critics counter that building large artificial islands in disputed waters increases tension and arms competition. They worry about a security dilemma. One side builds for defense. The other perceives it as an offense. They respond in kind. The cycle continues. Which interpretation is correct? Both, depending on perspective. What is clear is that 2026 marks an acceleration phase. Satellite images show outlines becoming clearer, infrastructure taking shape. Once basic land formation is complete, the next stage often includes runway construction, hangars, radar installations, port deepening, storage facilities, and living quarters. The mention of Da Nang being 350 kilometers away is not random. That is within the range of various missile systems deployed by China's rocket force. It also places Antelope Reef within a relevant operational radius for regional forces. Geography matters. At the same time, 350 kilometers is not next door. It does not put Chinese troops on Vietnam's shoreline. It is a buffer distance, but one that is strategically meaningful. The South China Sea disputes are not just about rocks and reefs. They are about identity, history, national pride, and future security. China views the region as historically part of its maritime sphere of influence. Vietnam has its own historical narratives. The Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei have claims rooted in modern international law, such as exclusive economic zones. The United States is not a claimant, but it has treaty allies and a strong interest in maintaining open sea lanes and preventing any single power from dominating Asia. So Antelope Reef sits at the intersection of all these currents. Over time, neighboring countries will become accustomed to China's island presence because it provides not only deterrence but also convenience. That is an optimistic view. It assumes that economic cooperation and shared services will soften geopolitical edges. There is some precedent for cooperation in the South China Sea. China and ASEAN have been negotiating a code of conduct for years. Joint development of resources has been proposed on several occasions. Fishery agreements have been discussed. But trust remains fragile. One interesting angle is cost. Keeping warships at sea constantly is expensive. Building fixed infrastructure requires a huge upfront investment, but it can lower long-term operating costs. Once an airstrip and harbor exist, planes and ships can rotate through more efficiently. China has the financial and engineering capacity to execute such projects quickly. Its dredging fleet is among the largest in the world. State-owned enterprises specialize in land reclamation. That is industrial capability translated into geopolitical influence. Another angle is domestic politics. Showing firmness in defending what is framed as national territory plays well at home. The narrative of never backing down again, after historical humiliations, resonates strongly in Chinese political discourse. At the same time, Beijing often emphasizes that it seeks stability and win-win cooperation. The phrase comprehensive support platform sounds less confrontational than military base. Language matters. In the long run, the real question is not just whether Antelope Reef becomes a base, a town, or a logistics hub. It is whether the South China Sea becomes a managed competition zone or a flashpoint. Artificial islands are now a fact. They are not going away. The debate shifts to how they are used. Will they be primarily defensive nodes, quietly monitoring sea lanes and supporting Coast Guard operations? Or will they become forward operating bases in a broader rivalry between major powers? For now, commercial shipping continues. Fishing boats continue. Diplomats continue to meet. Construction crews continue to dredge. The image of 22 dredgers churning up sand day and night is powerful. It symbolizes momentum. It suggests that time is on the builder's side. Every day of work turns water into land. And land, in geopolitical terms, is leverage. Filling the sea is about more than geography. It is about solidifying sovereignty in the hearts of people. That is a poetic way of saying that physical presence reinforces psychological confidence. Whether you agree or disagree with the strategy, you cannot deny its impact. Antelope Reef has already changed maps, satellite images, and strategic calculations. And here is the key point. In geopolitics, reality often follows concrete, not speeches. Once a runway is paved and a port is operational, debates about whether it should exist become secondary. The structure itself becomes part of the landscape. So as 2026 unfolds, Antelope Reef is not just another reef. It is a symbol of a broader shift. From patrols to permanence. From ambiguity to consolidation. From scattered outposts to integrated networks. A single island will not decide the South China Sea's future. But islands like this shape the environment in which decisions are made. And that, more than the sand itself, is why the world is watching.